Father, we delight in you. You are the God of all pleasure and delight. All these things we just shared are gifts from your hand, and the fact that we speak them out loud like this is just a testimony to you being the Father of lights, from whom every gift that is good comes down to us. Thank you for good gifts. Thank you for being just overflowing in grace toward us and mercy. Lord, as we read your word now and speak about it and think on it, give us the mind of Christ so that we would delight in it, that we would say we delight to do your word. And give us your Spirit so that we would understand how we can put this into practice in our lives, so that we would delight in you even more. Teach us now, Lord. We're your children. We're your students in your classroom. So teach us. Amen. So I don't forget, because I'm probably going to forget, a book I recommend. If you want a book, look at this. This is a really thin book. That means you could, anybody, you can read it. Sometimes I recommend really thick books, and I'm like, I don't know if this is really worth it. Because if you recommended a thick book to me, I'd be like, what kind of schedule you think I'm running, But this is a great book. It's a thin book that really, I think, gets at the heart of what we're going to be talking today, fleshes it out in life. It's called Strangely Bright. Strangely Bright. It's by Joe Rigney. He's actually going to be the president of he's the president-elect of my seminary. Joe Rigney, he's up in Minneapolis. He's a pastor at Cities Church up there. And so Strangely Bright, the subtitle is, Can You Love God and Enjoy This World? I don't know, can you? You'll have to read the book, or maybe we'll talk about it in our lesson a bit today. So I just want to recommend that because it's a great book. Today's lesson is titled, The Duty of Delight. We'll be in Ecclesiastes 11, 1-8, and we're going to be talking about duty and delight and their relationship to one another. In order to get into this, because we're kind of rounding third, going into home plate of Ecclesiastes, we're going to do a fly-through Concord speed review of Ecclesiastes and the wisdom that we've observed thus far in Ecclesiastes 1-10. So this is, if you missed it all, here's your time to just drown in Ecclesiastes for a moment, and we're going to try to get this overview. What is it that the book has been about? What is the wisdom of Ecclesiastes? So I'm just going to fly through each chapter. This will help us as we get into chapter 11 and then into chapter 12 next week, in 2 weeks. So, Ecclesiastes 1. There'll be some just little review statements up on the screen. Chapter 1 taught us this. No matter how hard you try, your wisdom won't discover more to life than what already is. Now, if you remember how the book starts, or if you don't remember, I'm going to tell you. The book starts not with the main speaker of the book, the main speaker who we've been calling the preacher. Sometimes he's called the teacher or the assembler. The book actually starts with someone else. I'll call him the compiler or the author. He's the person who put together Ecclesiastes. He gathered, he said, boy, this preacher guy, he's got some really good wisdom for us. He captures that wisdom together, puts it in written form, and he gives us a little introduction and a conclusion to Ecclesiastes. So we'll read the conclusion in a couple weeks. But the introduction, remember, he starts with this. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Hevel of Hevels, says the preacher. Hevel of Hevels, all is Hevel. Remember, Hevel is just that word, it means smoke or breath. So he's saying everything in life, all of life is just breath, smoke. And then he says, gets to that big question of Ecclesiastes, what does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? Essentially is, why are we here? What are we living for? Is there any point to this? Do I get anything out of it? Because we have this aching heart to make something of life or to get something of life. And the question that the preacher then is going to be asking is, can I find a way to get some profit out of life? Can I get ahead? I started with me, can I end life or carry life into something more than just me? And the preacher will come to the conclusion that's not the case. Life is just what it is. And like I said, by wisdom, you won't discover more to life than what already is. There's that line that's often quoted, there's nothing new under the sun. The preacher goes searching with his glasses. He's looking all around the world, using his wisdom. Is there any way to make more of life than what there is right now? What can I make meaning for my life? Can I find something? And he says, you can't find anything more than what is. That's just what it is. Chapter 2, he goes on, and the lesson now is the preacher's trying to figure out his life. He says, no matter how hard you try, your toil won't produce more life than what already is. So if you remember in chapter 2, the preacher goes in search of pleasure. Can I make life, I'm trying to find pleasure, something to satisfy me. So he builds houses, plants vineyards, makes parks, fruit trees, pools, has slaves, herds, flocks, silver, gold, everything he wants, possibly under the sun, he gathers for himself, kind of like building a personal Eden is what I called it. He's making this personal paradise for himself. And he finds at the end of the day, though, like he didn't find what he was searching for. He didn't find anything at the end of that. All of those pleasures, he was looking for them to do something for him. And he finds that there's nothing more than what was already there. And he comes to the conclusion, and this is a conclusion that the preacher comes to multiple times, that he should just enjoy life. Rather than be straining through life to try to catch something or to achieve something or to find something, he should enjoy life as it is in the present. He says this, 2:24, there's nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? So as the preacher starts searching and searching, he finds the thing that God has for mankind, for him and for all mankind, is to simply enjoy the pleasures of life, the basic things in life, food, family, and that is from the hand of God. Chapter 3, for everything there is a time, a season, a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to pluck up what's planted, a time to kill, a time to heal. Remember that poem? There's the song, I think we played it here maybe. The lesson of chapter 3 is you aren't in control of life's seasons. That's the thing. There's a time for everything. There's seasons of life, chapters of life. Things come and go. Relationships come and go. Sometimes you're working. Sometimes you're gaining work, living off your work. But you're not in control of life's seasons. And the lesson of chapter 3 is God is, it says that God has made everything beautiful in its time, meaning God's the one determining the shape and course of history of your life and everyone else, but you're not in charge. Therefore, you should fear God. You should fear the one who's in control. You should trust him. You should yield to him. And the preacher, in light of that, comes to the conclusion again, instead of trying to manage life, rather you should just receive it and trust God. He says, I perceive that there's nothing better for mankind than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Chapter 4, as the preacher continues his search and starting to come to these conclusions of God being in charge and we should fear him, he realizes that your neighbor isn't in the way of your enjoying the good life, but rather loving your neighbor is the means to it. So we're supposed to enjoy life, but there's this tendency we have where we think this guy, this girl has more stuff than me. They have more joy than me, so I need to get ahead of them. I need to get past them because whoever has more stuff, they're going to be the happy one. Whoever has more power, they're going to be the happy one. And so we're trying to take over one another. We think we're in each other's way. And so by oppression or through envying and being jealous of one another, that's a problem, we think, to our enjoyment of life. But the preacher says, as he observes through his little glasses, he says, that's not the case. they're not the enemy. They're actually the means to you enjoying life. Having a bunch of friends, he says, two are better than one. A threefold cord cannot be quickly broken. Having a bunch of people in your life is the means to enjoying it in the fear of the Lord. Chapter 5. There might be the tendency then, okay, I'll fear God, I'm going to enjoy life, so I'm going to tell God, okay, God, I'm going to do all these things. He says in this, guard your steps when you go to the house of God. To draw near to listen is better than to offer sacrifices. The preacher says, don't get creative with God, simply fear him. Anything more will steal your joy. There's a tendency of mankind to go before God and tell him, here's all the stuff I'm going to do for you, because then you'll pay me back, right? Like, I'll do something, and then you'll give me something back. So you make all these big vows to God. And the preacher says, whoa, 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 whoa. Don't be getting smart with God. He's the one, remember, he's the one in control. He's the one who determines all things. Rather, just simply draw near and listen to him rather than tell him. That's that sense of us trying to manage God for our joy. He's just reminding us again, it's much better if you just yield to God and just listen to what he has to say, and that's where you will find life. Anything more than that will steal your joy. And again, he wraps up that section of Ecclesiastes saying, I've seen it's good and fitting to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil that which one toils under the sun. That this is something that God has given us. That's what God has given us, to enjoy life. Chapter 6, a lesson we all need. Learn to be satisfied with the good things you already have. Again, you can start to see he's saying the same thing in multiple ways. My favorite line, maybe from the book, comes from Ecclesiastes 6, verse 9. Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of the appetite. And in this section, he's talking mostly about money, how our hearts just chase after stuff and money. And he says it's a lot better just to be satisfied with what you have, what's before you, than all the things you might be able to have. You know, there's this tendency, again, that we have where you might sit at home, you have a nice place, and you're thinking, but I could have a nicer place. Or you have a nice spouse, but she could be a nicer spouse. You have kids, but they could be more obedient because my neighbor's kids are better than mine. Ooh, wouldn't that be great if I had those? And Ecclesiastes says that's foolishness. It's better just to receive what you have. That's the way of finding enjoyment, not by always straining for more. Chapter 7, you will not discover God's schematic for space and time, but you will die, so fear him. This one was a lesson on wisdom. The chapter starts by talking about it's better, the day of death is better than the day of birth. It's better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. And the chapter wraps up with saying, he says that the preacher says, I was adding one thing to another, trying to find the scheme of things. How does the universe work? I got problems, I have desires, you all have problems, you have desires, God's in control, it's raining right now, it was sunny the other day. How does this all work together, and can I figure it out so that I can live in harmony with it? And the preacher says, you're not going to be able to figure out the whole scheme of things. That's God's business. He says, here's one thing you can figure out, though. You will die. That's something that's just given to us all. That's something now we know. That's something you can be certain about. And that should be guiding you. You're not going to know this big, giant scheme, but your death date should be guiding you to be wise. Death should be a teacher for you to then fear the one, again, who's in charge of the giant scheme of space and time. Chapter 8. You may be tempted to go the way of the wicked. Don't do it. Rather, fear God. So here's what chapter 8 was about. You look around the world, and you see sometimes it seems, or a lot of the time it seems, the wicked are actually doing better than the righteous. So why am I being righteous? That's really messed up. Why am I wasting my time trying to be good? When the wicked get praised, they get a good burial. Oftentimes, as the preacher says, the wicked get what the righteous deserve, and the righteous get what the wicked deserve. That's really messed up. And you might be, as you're looking around, you might be thinking, oh, I'm going to go the way of the wicked because that's the better life. That's where the joy is found. He says, don't do that. He says, I know it will be well with those who fear God. As a reminder, there are categories of wicked and righteous, which means there is a judge. This hasn't shown up a lot. It'll show up next week, where there is a day of judgment when rights will be right, wrongs will be righted, justice will be had. When the scales will balance, God has a day of justice coming. So he says, don't look around and get smart. Don't think, okay, I see something, so I'm going to go that way. Rather, believe, trust God, and that's the way to enjoy life. Chapter 9, you're going to die. Therefore, live life to the full. Give everything 110%. Living is the goal of life. We'll see that today in our text. So we'll leave that as sitting there. And then chapter 10. Don't believe the world when they undervalue wisdom. Wisdom will preserve your joy. This is similar to that chapter 8 about wickedness. There's a tendency when you read Ecclesiastes to think, wisdom, what's the point? Wisdom meaning just understanding in the fear of the Lord. We think, oh man, that's dumb, because folly seems a lot more enjoyable. People party it up, they're eating, they're drinking. Oh, it looks like they're all having such a good time. But the preacher reminds us that wisdom is good, and it's preservation. It's keeping you. It delivers you. It's actually the path to joy. And that's what brings us to chapter 11. So there's your fast sweep. As the preacher's been trying to figure out, what should I do with my life? Like, what should I be trying to achieve? What should I be striving after? And he starts to round it out here in chapter 11. So let's dig into chapter 11 and see what he has to say. So we're going to be looking at verses 1 to 8, and I'll be marking some things up on the screen as well. So the first thing he says to us is, in light of all of that, in light of your lack of understanding of the universe and everything, but your understanding that you're going to die, what should you do? Live. And what he means by that, like when I say that as an imperative, like live, I mean like right now. That's a present active imperative, if anybody likes grammar. That means you should be living right now. That's his exhortation. So here's what he says. Chapter 11, 1 to 4. Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. Give a portion to 7 or even to 8. For you do not know what disaster may happen on earth. If the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves on the earth. If a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where the tree falls, there it will lie. He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. Essentially what the preacher is saying here is, in light of all this ambiguity and the fact that you can't grasp life and manage it to whatever end that you want, he says rather you should just live life, rather than try to make it or manage it into something. He uses the imagery of work here, of sowing, reaping, sending out, giving. We're actually going to work backwards from verse 3 and 4 back to verse 1 and 2. Because 1 and 2, I don't even know exactly what it means. We're going to figure it out from verse 3 and 4. So let's work this out together. Verse 3 and 4, here's the first thing he says regarding not knowing. He says, if the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves on the earth. If a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where the tree falls, there it will lie. He who observes the wind, the thing that made that tree fall. See that? The tree fall. He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds that dump the rain, that's really wiggly, will not reap. The sense being, if you're standing outside, like I was on Friday, thinking about Saturday, so we just moved a couple things, a big play set from my house, and everybody's like, it's going to rain cats and dogs on Saturday, and I don't know what time, and I'm watching the weather app, trying to time this thing. If I'm trying to figure out, essentially time the market, time life, and say, I know what's going to come tomorrow, and that's how I'm making my decisions, I'm never going to do anything, because you'll never know. Like, nobody knows exactly when the rain's going to come. Everybody, that's just like the mockery of Nebraska, but it's probably the mockery of every state. where it's like, you watch the weatherman and then you curse him the next day because he was wrong. You say, what a fool, what's wrong with you? Can't you ever get this thing right? I knew the rain was coming, And so if I was thinking about this rain that was coming, I would never have even moved that play set because I'd be thinking, well, it could be bad or it could be hot tomorrow. It could be cold, or maybe something could go wrong with me. I might break my leg and then I can't move the thing, or maybe my friends won't show up and then I shouldn't move it. That's the idea, is you're never going to do anything. You're never actually going to live if you're trying to time it, if you're trying to figure out the world, just like the preacher has been doing. There is a sense in this of randomness in this, where the rain, sometimes they fall and sometimes the wind shows up, where you don't know. That's what the preacher called back in, I think it was chapter 8 or 9, time and chance. The idea of that, though, isn't time and chance in the sense of the world's just a haphazard reality. Who's in charge? I don't know. It's just, like a big bang just happened and we'll see what happens tomorrow. The sense of that is time and chance is God's providence working out in life is happening all around us, but we're not in on the majority of that knowledge. So let's take a look back at then verse 1 and 2. The preacher says, in a similar sense, just like sowing and reaping, he says, cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. Give a portion to 7 or even to 8, for you do not know what disaster may happen on earth. So he's saying to do something. Cast, or the word also means like send out. So send out, cast, and give. So you can see the sense of like you're doing something with your stuff, your bread, your portion. So some of your goods, you're sending them out into the world. You're trusting them entrusting them unto the providence of the Lord. You're doing something. You're living. Live. And in this case, he's using the example of work. Cast your bread upon the waters. What does that mean? How about that? Just imagine that. It's a weird image, right? Now think about maybe bread that's not like ours that will just soak it all up. Probably a lot thicker bread. So you throw it out on the water and it just starts to float away. That's the image that he gives us. The sense, I think, that the preacher is trying to give, there's two senses. Some people take this as a means that the preacher's saying be generous with lots of people because of this word give. Like, so be generous. Send out your goods and it'll come back to you. There might be a sense of that in his mind, but his train of thought, because what came right before this in Ecclesiastes 10, he was talking about righteous and wicked rulers, where bread, he says this in chapter 10, verse 19, bread is made for laughter and wine gladdens life. Money answers everything. So the stuff you have is good, but it's timing. Timing's the matter of whether it's used for good or not. And I think he's grabbing a hold of that, where the things that you possess, send them out into the water, kind of like a ship sending out to sea. Do your business, almost like if you were like a maritime trader. Send it out and keep going. The second sense is give a portion to 7 or 8. So as you send out your stuff, the idea isn't send it all in one direction, but do all of your work. This right here, where he says give it to 7 or 8, I think is the sense of don't put all your eggs in one basket. How about that for a little wisdom proverb? He's saying don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't just do one thing in life. Do it all. So that might include, I don't know if I can even write anymore, work. Send it that way. Spend your gifts, your goods on that. Family. You're not even going to be able to read this. Friends. Community, etc. So spend yourself, spend your life toward lots of endeavors. Don't let the unknowns of the universe cause you to do this, hoard and hold back, but rather spend it out. And then he grabs a hold of what he's going to say down here with the rain and the wind, because you don't know what's coming. You don't know what disasters coming tomorrow. You don't know if anything's going to go good or bad. So you have two choices. Either be frozen in time and wait for the right time to do it, and it's never going to come, or live. I think that's the general idea of this text. I know there's maybe a few more nuances here, but the idea is don't be so frozen by the unknowns. Rather, let that free you up to live. Jesus and the Proverbs talk about this same issue of not being able to forecast the future. So just so you know, this wisdom is elsewhere. You may have thought about this. Jesus says, Matthew 6, don't worry about tomorrow. Don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will worry about itself. And he's talking about goods. Like, don't worry about the stuff you need, all the things, right? About life. He says, don't worry about it. Live today. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. The Proverbs, and James quotes this, says, don't boast about tomorrow. So you can go that way too, where you're saying, I know what's coming tomorrow, and I'll make sure it happens. Don't do that either. That's folly. You cannot forecast the future. So in the case of living, the preacher is saying, life is not hazard-free. Life is full of hazards. Wind, rain, trouble, sickness, even death. But risk is not meant to paralyze us. It's meant to free us to live. Risk or unknowns are meant to free us. Anybody agree with that or disagree with that statement? That risk and unknowns are meant to free us to live? Any thoughts on that line?
It's liberating from the standpoint that you're not shackled to those things anymore. So whether they come or whether they go, Paul's comments about, I've learned to live in contentment. You know, if I'm hungry, if I'm satisfied, whichever. And then ultimately, it gives you that ability just to trust in God and his provision at the moment.
Yeah, Paul, so end of Philippians, we've quoted this a few times in class, where he says, I've learned the secret of being content, which I think he's saying I've learned the secret of being joyful, because that's the whole book of Philippians. Like, I have a great life. You know why? Because if I'm rich, I'm happy. If I'm poor, I'm happy. Because he says, because I got Jesus. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. That's the same sense here is fear the Lord. Just trust him. Yield to him. And that's where it is. Because like you said, I love that term. You're not shackled to some future outcome. You're not saying, I'll only be happy if fill in the blank. That's not the sense. I'm happy because I'm alive today. Yeah.
I think this is the biggest struggle of my life. I'm the mom, I buy the food, and I've always got to prep in advance. And I'm not an extreme prepper, but I always have in the back of my mind, what if something happens? I have to have a month's worth of food in the house, and usually more. But, I struggle with that. Sufficient for the day is the
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and it's interesting, I don't want to create a false dichotomy, but I do think this is more of a challenge probably for us who are wealthy, because the people I know, a few people around the world, that are very poor and in very tight spots in life seem so much freer and so much happier. Because they don't have all these things, and they don't have the illusion of control, right? I can go get a job. I have money. I can buy the house. I can. And that's a gigantic illusion. Now, some things might work themselves out, but you cannot determine the course of your life. That's not the case. If you are, you're living in an illusion. That's the sense of Hevel. Like you're grabbing something, and it's a lie. It's an idol. So, for sake of time, we're going to move on. Verse 5 and 6, the preacher continues this, and he draws our attention to, he doesn't just say live, just live, period. He says live in the fear of the Lord. So, as you're fearing God, that's your key to living. Verse 5, as you do not know the way the Spirit comes into the bones in the womb of a woman with child, so you do not know the work of God. That's where that fear of the Lord is. You don't know the work of God who makes everything. In the morning, sow your seed, and at evening, do not withhold your hand, for you do not know which will prosper, this or that, or whether both alike will be good. Very similar message. I think he's just getting a little more theological with it. So he says, you don't know the way of the Spirit comes in the bones of a woman. Some of you may have a different version. There's two variants in the text. So this is maybe talking about you don't know the way of the wind. Spirit and wind are similar words in Hebrew. And you don't know the way the bones are formed in the womb of a woman. So it's either you don't know how life is formed in the womb of in a woman, like that's it, or you don't know the way of the wind. You don't know the way a life is formed in the womb. Those are things that are way outside of our grasp. If you got that figured out, if you say, I'm a scientist and I know, I'm like, you do not know, right? The whole, like the abortion, like pro-life or pro-choice movement is clarity that we don't know that the human beings miss out on, that is life being formed in the womb of a woman. You don't know why the wind comes and blows which way or that way. In a similar way, this is where he wants our attention to be drawn. You don't know the work of God who makes everything. This is very Job-like. Who are you? Right? When God answers back to Job, do you know where the rain comes from? Are you the one who commands it to fall? Do you tell all the animals to go their which way, and when they live and when they die? Do you form human beings? You don't know God, like the work of God. In that sense, you don't know that. And in light of that, so he's saying fear God. That's what he's saying. Similar message. Fear God rather than fight against him, curse him, and hate him in return for the fact that you don't have that knowledge, or try to become him. I'll find the knowledge, or I'll create the knowledge for myself. The response is, in fearing God, sow your seed, and at evening withhold not your hand. The sense is, live your life in the morning. At night, keep living, keep working, keep spending yourself, doing the things that are life, because you don't know which will prosper, this or that, whether both alike will be good. There is a perseverance and a diligence that comes from the fear of the Lord that keeps you pressing on into the next moment, into the next moment, into the next moment, where we continue in our work. There are some potential responses that the fool might have to this lack of knowledge. There's this tendency we want to know what's the next moment hold. Some of our responses, I think we've talked about this in previous weeks as well. One response might be to give up. I don't know what's going to come. I give up, right? I think we've all been in that camp before where I'm so frustrated, life's not going my way, and I have no clue what's coming next. What's the point? What's the point in living? Like, why am I here? Second one is we give in, which might be worse. Both are very negative, so we don't know what's going to happen in the next moment, so we give in. I think this is the nature of what Paul draws on in 1 Corinthians 15, where there's people who say, well, we're all going to die, so let's just eat, drink, be merry, for tomorrow we die. Like, I give in. I don't know anything, so I'll just do whatever the heck I feel. Like, I feel like I want to do this now. So we live by indulgences, and we indulge ourselves, or we live instinctually, just whatever I want next, I'm just going to go for that. You just give into it. There's another way that we do this with not knowing the work of God. Instead of just living life, we adopt an attitude of ingratitude. We lack gratefulness to God. We don't see the good things we have right now because we're thinking about all the other things we don't have. And sometimes we even then merge into idolatry, where we either put ourselves as the idols or we turn the things of this earth into idols. All of that is folly. Rather, the preacher is just telling us to live life, continue living, live in the present. The final section of our text, verses 7 and 8, speaks of the duty of delight, and we'll try to put all this together. It's interesting how the preacher kind of turns on a dime here to this phrase. So he says this, verse 7, light is sweet, and it's pleasant for the eyes to see the sun. So if a person lives many years, let him rejoice in them all. But let him remember that the days of darkness will be many. All that comes is... Think I can grab it? I got some. All that comes is Hevel. Verse 7. Life is good. That's what he's saying right there. That's really bad writing. Life is good. Light is sweet. It's good to see the sun. It's pleasant to see the sun. That's a phrase, to see the sun. Living life under the sun has been a phrase he's used over and over again. It's in contrast down here to darkness, which is death. It's good to be alive, is what he's saying. That's a sweet thing. It's a precious thing. It's a satisfying thing, a pleasurable thing to be alive. Therefore, if you live many years as you live, rejoice in them. Rejoice in them. Enjoy the goodness of life. But let him remember that the days of darkness will be many. All that comes is Hevel. First, part of the key to enjoying life is remembering that death is coming. If you don't think death is coming, you think, oh, I can always make up for it tomorrow. I can always make up for it tomorrow. I can always make up for it tomorrow. Or I'll enjoy life tomorrow. This is called procrastination, right? Like procrastination of your joy. You're like delayed gratification. This text is saying, don't delay it. Enjoy life as whatever you have right now. If you have a family, enjoy that. If you have food, enjoy that. If you have a Bible, enjoy that. If you have breath in your lungs, enjoy it. Letting death, the day of death that's coming, be a teacher to say, you might not have this tomorrow. You might not have this in 5 minutes. Another teacher that we've seen throughout the Bible is this, the Hevel of Life. All that comes is Hevel. Now, what the preacher, he probably means maybe one of two things, or maybe both at the same time. In one sense, all that comes as Hevel is everything in your life is unknown to you. It's like that smoke. It's a mist out there. You don't know what's coming. In another sense, Hevel, because we're going to see it next week, is used in the sense of it's brief. Just like that smoke's not still going anymore, the smoke's just, pshh. Life is going to go boom and it's done. And you're going to miss it if you don't start living right now. If you don't start living right now. This is not hopelessness. The book of Ecclesiastes is a giant reality check. It's just like, here's a helpful reminder. Maybe even it's a test. Maybe even a test that you might learn to receive the good things that God gives. And therefore, we should allow death and Hevel to drive us to zealous, joyful living. This is what the preacher said back in chapter 9, verse 7 to 10. Go, eat your bread with joy, drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has already approved what you do. Let your garments be always white. Let not oil be lacking on your head. That means like dress yourself up, feel good, look good, do what's going to satisfy. Enjoy life with the wife whom you love. Relationships matter. All the days of your Hevel life that he's given you under the sun, because that's your portion in life, and in your toil, in which all you toil under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. Go for it. Like live life to the full. So the question I think comes is, what is this? This is an interesting question that I've been racking my mind over. What is it to... Oh. Whoa. Wrong way. Gave it all away. There we go. What is it to have enjoyment? Like, I asked this a couple weeks back, I think. This is like, these are the weird questions we ask as Christians, and people are like, you're all nuts, just to have a good time, right? So, but what is it to have enjoyment? This is what the book is calling us to. What is this? So I've been thinking through this, and here's a rough idea of what enjoyment is, and then we'll look at some texts that I think maybe make it a bit clearer. So enjoyment, at its essence, is just satisfaction in a thing or an experience or a person. Satisfaction. But what's that kind of look like? And I think this is the sense of it. It's a full embrace of something. It's a consumption of something. We talked about that with food a while back, where you can't enjoy food fully until you consume it. Like you take it in. And the interesting thing is, it's done then. Like the joy eventually ends with that. Or it's an experience of a thing. So an embrace, a consumption, an experience of a thing. So for instance, like work can be enjoyable or not enjoyable. And the reason why work is enjoyable is generally not because you like it, but because you give yourself to it. You embrace the task you've been given. And you learn to love it because you're investing in it. You're seeking life. So in that sense, what the preacher's saying is that enjoyment is simply receiving the present, living in the present. It's not looking for the past. It's not waiting for the future, but it's a full participation in the present. It's just living in now, receiving it. Which leads us to this phrase, the duty of delight. There's a commentary, I think it's 80 to 100 years old, but it's got some great things, the Pulpit Commentary. About verse 8, one of the commentators writes this: life is sweet and precious. The preacher says life is sweet and precious. Then he adds that it is therefore man's duty to enjoy it. God has ordained that he should do so. I don't think I could say it much better. The sense of this text, the sense of the book, the sense of all of life in the Bible and everything, is your duty is to simply live. Life, this is like a dot, like life is meant to be lived. It's not meant to be delayed. It's not meant to be managed and sought. It's just meant to be lived, to be enjoyed, to just embrace what you have at the moment. Life is meant to be lived and enjoyed. That's our duty. A question might arise from that, but life is hard and filled with disappointments and suffering. This stinks. Like, why am I trying to enjoy this? Like, give me a better life. That's why I'm chasing after something. That's why I'm trying to find a job that satisfies me, a life that satisfies me, a spouse that satisfies me, stuff that satisfies me, because life's terrible now. Life's hard. What should we do? That's kind of the preacher's point. The preacher's point is, yeah, life is hard. Therefore, stop fighting and learn to live. Life is filled with trouble, he said multiple times. Life is filled with unexpected hardships. You don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. Life is filled with failure. Not all of your efforts will produce what you want. Life is filled with wickedness and folly. There's a mess around us. Life is filled with people who die. Death is coming. And that's been the teacher the whole time. Disappointment, trouble, and hardship has been the teacher. It's the test of life of, will we fear God and simply just receive what he gives, whatever good things, however big or small they may be, or will we look at him and say, I want more. This isn't right. Because in the end, the real gift is himself that he's giving us through those objects, through food, through family. I think this is probably best seen in the life of a child. So you think about how a child really does know how to live. So I just think about my kids. Like the other day, Waldo went to stay with Grandma and Grandpa, so we got extra time with, Sarah and I got time with the girls, mostly Dolly, because Lois just kind of wanders around and does things. She's 1. But Dolly, who's 2.5, we got to have all kinds of fun. And for her, you can see it in how she plays. She's not stressed about what came before, what's coming after. She's just simply engaged with whatever little toys in front of her. Now, there's times when it gets frustrating, right? Like where she wants something. But in general, those moments, you see it, where she's obeying this duty to live and to enjoy. She has her little dolls, and she's feeding them with a spoon, pretending to feed them and all that. And she's so engaged in that moment. And what you see in her, like, I'm watching her, I'm like, I want that. I want that freedom, where I'm not so stressed, but I'm just whatever I have right now. I mean, this is the other lesson from kids. You know, early on as parents, now that we have a 4-year-old, let me give you guys some wisdom. Don't worry, some gray hairs coming in. Early on, though, we're like, oh man, we got to get this toy for them, and get this toy for them, and get this toy for them, and get this toy for them. But if we give them a box, they can be happy. If we give them just outside, they're happy. They don't need a lot. That's the thing. We'll be like, but my life's so hard right now. I don't have enough stuff. And we're all like, it's filthy rich and all this stuff. And we're living in, like, we think we need more and more and more. And they're just content with that. They're just content with what they have. That's the sense of this duty that God has given us. I want to show you at a couple places in Scripture to remind you that this is truly what God has called mankind to do. Sorry, that yellow line's going to stay there because I don't think, well, let me see if I can undo it. I can't undo it. All right, so 2 spots in the Old Testament where we see this is the duty that God has given us, to simply delight, to live. So living is life, and enjoying is what we're supposed to do within our life. Genesis 2, 9 and 16. Out of the ground the Lord God made spring up every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life was in the midst of the garden, and the Lord God commanded. Okay, I want you to hear that. He commanded this. And we never hear this command. We always hear the one that's in the ... that I just crossed over. I'll just do a circle. There we go. Commanded, you may surely eat that, the pleasant stuff, the tree of life, eat that. There's your command. Have at it. Enjoy it. You can see where the preacher's getting his wisdom from, because the other tree is don't eat that, and we're all standing here like, I want that one, because I don't have that. If I had that, then I'll be happy, because then I have it all. But he gives, I just read this is in this book, that God is a God of many yeses. I know that sounds very prosperity gospel, but it's true. Like, the garden is yes, 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 and it's all delightful. And that's the command, to simply enjoy it. God gives Adam a woman, a wife, and his response is just enjoyment, and the sense is for them just to enjoy it together now. And Adam's response is, it's so much better. I want to read you this quote from this book. It's so good. So he paraphrases Adam's response. When Adam says, at last, bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh, like, finally someone who I can relate to, I understand, but she's different, but it's awesome because she's beautiful, this is amazing. Here's how Joe Rigney paraphrases that. As if Adam is talking, he says, God has torn me in two only to put me together again. He removed my rib from me so that he might return it with interest. Isn't that nice? That's the sense that I'm like, that's my rib, God. That's part of my body. It's like, oh, wait. Okay, that was a good idea. God gives that. He gives them a task to be fruitful and multiply. Being fruitful is a joyful thing. And especially in the sense of like making kids, like that also is meant to be joyful. All of the things that God gives to his people in the garden initially are meant for their joy. And the only thing that they're really tasked to do with is to enjoy it. And in enjoying it, it will thrive. Same thing then, so God's people do not enjoy it. They get really greedy and they want more from life, and so they go take the tree that they're not supposed to take. They get cast out. But God says, I'm going to bring you back into the land. I'm going to bring you back in. Saves them out of Egypt with Moses. And he says this, that as they're on the edge of the land, he says, if you go in the land and you simply enjoy, you trust me and you do my law, you obey my commands, ultimately just to trust and enjoy, you can have all the land and it will be good with you. But he says, if you get back into the land and you don't obey me, if you don't obey my commands, here's what happens, Deuteronomy 28. All these curses shall come upon you and pursue you and overtake you till you're destroyed, because you did not obey the voice of the Lord your God to keep his commandments. To keep his commandments and the statutes that he commanded you. Now, so we could say right there, okay, the reason why the people of Israel, they go into the land and then they start idol worship and all those sorts of things. The reason why they get cast out is because they didn't do the right thing. They did the wrong thing. And God said, don't build an idol, and they built an idol. That was it. God's like, that's not it. Your heart's the problem, right? The heart's the problem the whole time. Because he goes on, describing what it looks like for them not to obey him, what it looks like not to obey his commandments, because you did not serve the Lord your God with joyfulness and gladness of heart, because of the abundance of all things. See, God gave them all these things, a land that flows with milk and honey, as if the land just kind of does its thing, like Eden, and just produces goodness for them. And the problem wasn't merely they made a wooden statue and bowed down to it. They made a golden calf and bowed. That's not the problem. It's that they didn't receive what he gave them and cherished it. You know, it's like getting a present and then just kind of like throwing it off to the side. Like they missed the point. The duty was the duty of delight. And so as we round toward home base, in Ecclesiastes, as we'll talk about death more next week, and think about how some things of this earth will end, but there is a delight that lives on forever. I just encourage you to chew on this and to think about how God initially and continues to give us this duty simply to cherish, as Philippians says, to be content, as Jesus says, don't worry about tomorrow, and just to trust him. And what he brings, cherish it, enjoy it, delight in it. And that you won't find life because of that. That is life. Life is cherishing. Life is following God in that, obeying the command to eat and enjoy. And that's the message of the duty of delight. If anybody has one question, I know we have 1 minute because that clock's fast. Oops. Yeah.
I'm interested in knowing more about that resource, the duty of delight. Who's the author and what's their background?
Well, God, but ultimately...
My wife just told me that I missed.
So this is the Pulpit Commentary. It's free online, actually, because it's like way out of print. I don't know, because it's multiple authors, it's an interesting commentary that... the whole commentary doesn't read like this. That was just a sweet line in there where I think they really got it right. But I think Joe Rigney gets at it, because what Rigney's grabbing onto is a lot of the same stuff that Piper has. That the idea is not to forsake everything in the world. So here, I'll give you one more quote. But that we should enjoy it to the full. So he kind of grabs the line. I said, turn your eyes upon Jesus, look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely clear. That's my line. His is they'll grow strangely bright. In Jesus, you're going to see food for what food is. Awesome. You're going to see marriage for what it is. So much more than the world sees it. And all the things of the world. And so his exhortation to the reader, he says this, my main counsel to those struggling with how to enjoy the things of the earth, while knowing that Jesus is better, so he talks about that, the nature, Jesus is better than all the things of the earth, but he gives us those things to know him and to enjoy him. He gives us visible things to know and enjoy the invisible. His counsel would be to avoid suppressing any of their legitimate pleasures when they arise. Then he says, my counsel is to take the governor off. Is that, and you can dig into the book to get a little sense of that, but Jesus isn't saying, well, eat the food, but say like, well, this is all right, but Jesus is better. But it's taste and see that the Lord is good. You enjoying like an apple, a steak, whatever, ice cream, to its full, gives you the ability to say, oh man, if it's that good, how much better is Jesus? And that's the thing that we miss out on as Christians. Sometimes we say, I'm going to suppress my pleasure. I'm only happy in God, nothing else. And God's like, I've given you a world to know how good I am, and you're denying it all. And so I think that's the sense where he's saying, your duty to enjoy God and glorify him is by eating and enjoying those good things in order to know his delight and his pleasure so much more. Yeah, so that's the sense for what it's worth. So thank you all. We'll see you next week. Well, we'll see you in 5 minutes and we'll sing. So thank you.